Right, so welcome everybody. Sorry about the slow setup, but we'll endeavour to get started. Let's put our hands together for them.
Since I was here last time, I have found out a lot more about the process that the Victorian government has used in cancelling your titles. I know that doesn't make the situation any better, but at least if you have a sound knowledge of what the Victorian government has done, and they have created such a befuddle that I would hate to be anyone administering what they have come up with in 10, 20, 30 years. It is just a convoluted mess. What they have done, different to every other state, is deemed that that little bit of binary code on a private computer is a title deed. And up until the 3rd of next month, which isn't very far away, if you purchased your property before 98 and it is clear of mortgages, Ben McMahon has a process of removing it out of the electric certificates of title back into paper certificates of title. So you would actually have yes. Why those two dates? Nobody can figure or even remotely understand. Ben has been successful with one bank, even with titles that have mortgages on them. He's arguing correctly that the banks no longer need to hold the paper titles, and that includes parchment titles as well. Because according to the Victorian government, and I have that on a slide, in 2016, they cancelled all of those paper and parchment titles. So I also have Ben's contact number, and he's told me that if anyone wants to go through the process of having their title brought out of the electronic process to a paper title, he's offered to help anyone. You will need professional help to do it, but Ben can tell you the process. So that's at least one glimmer of hope. Outside of that, all the titles, all the paper titles and the parchment titles were cancelled when not the titles office, but the superannuation group who has purchased the titles office, they have assisted in the process of getting the titles out of the electronic process. It sounds a little bit convoluted. It does take about 6 weeks, but Ben has told me that if you can start the process before the 3rd of August, he can help you. Okay, so we've gone to sleep.
Is that August or his name again?
Ben McMahon. Actually, my phone is out here.
I've got his details too.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, but it'd be better. Have you got it on your phone?
I'll put it on the Telegram site.
Right, okay.
July or
August?
August?
Yeah. Well, the 3rd of July's gone.
June.
June, yeah.
3rd of June.
Yeah. My apologies. Yeah. Not only can't I pick the right cafe, I've lost a month there.
No, it's July.
Yes.
Is it July then?
No, 3rd of August. Some of you will have seen some of the slides, but for anybody who is... how many people are here for the first time? Oh, wow, good. Excellent. Yes, so the premiers of all of the states in 2013 agreed to change to electronic lodgement for title transfers. What they didn't tell anyone was, as part of that process, they were going to cancel all the paper and parchment titles. Canada was the instigation of the whole process initially in 2000. In Canada, they have electronic lodgement and they still issue titles. New Zealand went digital in 2010. They still issue titles. So there is no way that just because Australia has gone electronic transfer and lodgement, they couldn't continue with titles because everybody else has. So there is something that is just not right. Queensland, in actuality, brought in electronic lodgement back in late 1980 anyhow. And they continued to issue titles until 2019. So they were doing electronic lodgement and still issuing titles. So it is a concern as to why they have cancelled all the original titles. The Commonwealth Constitution of 1900, that's the English Empowering Act, right, binds all the states and territories to function within the granted powers within the Constitution. And I'll pass my quick and Garen around with it open, because the first 9 sections in the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia actually is the English Empowering Act. It's Act 63-64 Victoria. So that binds the Commonwealth itself to the British Crown. The Victorian government in August 2018 actually sold the Titles Office for, let's see if I can, for $2.86 billion. So that's 2,860 millions, which is a lot of hoot. Yes.
Where did the money go? Where did the money go?
Into consolidated revenue. Yes. So, the entity that purchased the titles office was First State Superannuation of New South Wales. So it wasn't even a Victorian company. First State Superannuation also purchased the New South Wales titles office for a similar amount. And the interesting thing is, how are they going to get a return for their members, having spent over $5 billion in purchasing both of those titles offices? So, First State then amalgamated with Aware Super, and that made the conglomerate the third largest superannuation scheme in Australia. So then, well, their headquarters are in New South Wales, as I said earlier. They then amalgamated with another superannuation. Yeah, and I've checked this figure twice because it just seems unreal that they amalgamated at a cost of 150 billion. I've been back on the site twice because I didn't type this. I used a process called SNP and actually captured their website. Following having amalgamated, then, I'm sorry, that's the next slide. Yeah, following that amalgamation, the group then lost over 400 million of value. And that was actually picked up and prompted an investigation by ASIC. I haven't been able to follow that any further, but that's the entity now that holds the titles office in Victoria for 40 years. We are up a little bit high. Anyhow, there's not much up there. Barry O'Farrell, as the Premier of New South Wales, copied the Canadian Act for electronic transfer. So it passed through the lower house and the upper house and was gazetted. It's what he then did with that New South Wales Act that is so far out of the realms of what they should be doing. He actually took that New South Wales Act to COAG. COAG is the coalition of Australian government, COAG. There's no constitutional standing for COAG, and there's no state law that actually underpins it. It's just what I call an it. So it sits out there somewhere, carrying on, controlling totally the transfer of property in Australia. So your government then adopted the national law.
Who was Premier then?
That I can't tell you off the top of my head. I can tell you who was Premier in 2013. I've got those all listed at the end. So what you actually have now is a law that's been, and a law has, as I said earlier on, in relation to COAG, and this law was created through an entity called ARNET, but that slide is just a little bit out of sequence. So what Victoria has adopted that law knowingly that they cannot alter it without the... You're right, babies cry. So the Victorian government can't alter that law which controls all of the property transactions, because the way COAG used to work, once 75% of the states agreed on an issue, then the other 25% of the states are bound to it. So if Victoria wanted to change that law, then all of the other states have got to agree to that change and adopt the change. It's absolutely absurd. So there's the electronic conveyancing national law altering other acts, Victorian acts. So that was, they adopted that in 2013, right back. So this is still COAG existing at that point in time. They altered the Transfer of Land Act as well. So this is the area and the time when the Victorian government cancelled all of your titles. So on the weekend of 22nd of October 2016, at the behest of the banks. This is off their website. This is not something that I've dreamt up. So they did this for the ANZ, CBA, NAB and Westpac. So they bundled up all of the old titles and transferred them directly into electronic titles. Yes, so if you've got a title, according to the Victorian government, right, it is now void.
What if it's 2010?
Same. they progressively, yeah, that at the time when you purchased that, that previous owner, their title was electronic. Oh, sorry, you said 2010. Yeah, well, that title then, in 2016, right, was transferred into an electronic title. And at that same time, the document that you hold in your hands was declared void. That's the reality of what they have done. Oh, sorry, two things I missed. If you want to, I apologise, do just a voice recording of this. I think Rick will get the actual video, and
We can go on the Telegram.
yes, I'm not real happy with that.
Okay.
Share it within the group, yes, because there's some pretty heavy information here that the government is not going to like it being actually brought out, and it's like laundering their dirty washing. Hang on, just a second. Sorry?
I think the group we have on the Telegram is a closed group, so only the members can see.
Oh, is that right?
There's a private group.
Oh, that's fabulous, no problems.
No.
Well, no, see, the problem is, up until now, I've been able to travel everywhere without any real problems. A little bit of graffiti, but nothing from the governments. So we've sort of got to keep a lid on that so I can keep on going. Yeah, that's the reason. I've had my death threats, so being told I should have armed guards and all the rest of that garbage. So that's the actual date that they are saying, on the 22nd of October 2016, your genuine titles were declared void. No jurisdiction whatsoever. Yes.
What if it wasn't always before that?
Same.
Oh.
Yes. And unfortunately, if you purchased your property after 1983, what did I say? 98. Yes. Why? This is what just doesn't make any sense, really. Anything after that date is locked up in the title. But we do have a remedy, and I need each and every one of you, I need your help to help me get 100,000 signatures. So at the moment we do that, I will request a bill in the House of Commons, and I'll explain later on why we're going there.
Len,
Yes.
you're saying there that this chap, Ben, can
Yes.
help you get the title and stuff. If the titles were declared void on the October the 16th, what's the good of getting him to get you your original title if they're void?
That is part of the conundrum. I agree with you, because and they are taking them out of the electronic lodgement if they were purchased before the 1998. Yeah, purchased before then, no mortgage on it. They will actually give you a paper title that they have cancelled here.
Yes, but I can't see why they're going to give you a paper title if all titles from that date a void.
Yes.
Except at pre-98, though not.
It's taken it out of the electronic.
Yeah, it's taking it out of the electronic process, but they're giving you exactly what they've cancelled here.
Yeah.
It's yes. This is part of what I was saying earlier on. That in 10, 20 years, this is, you know, just going to be such a mess. Yes.
When you say the titles prior to that 98,
Yes.
when you say they to be paid, is that paid off before that time, or could that time have been after, as long as you bought the property?
I understand it had to be clear, right? If it was under mortgage,
Yeah.
then that process isn't available. It's only titles that have either been mortgaged before and cleared. Ben is also saying they will accept if you apply to have the bank release their names off the title. They will do that, so that would be all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I bought one in 86.
Yes.
I can't remember when it was finally paid.
Say, I actually, I don't know if someone else has done this, but about 7 years ago, I finished paying off my mortgage, so I got the title, but it still had the Commonwealth Bank written on it. So only a couple
Yes.
of years ago,
Yeah.
I went to the titles office and got a new title without the title.
Oh, yes.
But
So
the
you
problem
went,
was, they got me to sign the back of it in black capital letters on my old title. So
yeah.
I've sort of handed it over to them, haven't I?
Well, yes.
And paid for the
Yeah, the privilege of doing that. Yes, yeah. If you and what you're talking about is affected the discharge.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it means nothing, does it? The paper
No.
I got.
Well-
I mean,
Yes. However, when the process goes through the House of Commons, all of those titles will be lawful and legal and proof of ownership.
okay.
Yes, which they're not at the moment.
So does in fee simple on the title mean nothing then? Like if your title, you haven't paid the title but it has in fee simple, that means nothing?
Yes. Unfortunately, what what the lady is saying, if you hold your titles in fee simple, all of these paper certificates that the government is issuing with the hologram on the bottom left-hand corner, they are all status fee simple. They've removed the word in fee simple. And the reason for doing that, the word in within the title puts you, the owner, in the title.
So, to do the other way around, to get it from Ben,
Yes,
when I bought mine in 2010, my other old home, it was before that, you know, that I sold that. And so this one, I can't even get a title then from it, because it was
No.
2010. So it's a waste of
Correct.
time getting looking
yeah.
to get it.
Until we are successful in the House of Commons, then all of your titles are lawful, legal proof of ownership.
Where are they held now?
They're held on one of two private companies' computers, either PEXA
But it's only
or
a
Simply Australia.
But the paper titles, did they burn those?
Well, there are varying stories. However, going back to the Torrens title process, have to get swivels on the hips, I think. Going back to the Torrens title process, there are 3 identical original certificates of title created for every parcel of land. The first one goes to the purchaser. The second one was normally held by the titles office, and the third one goes straight into the archives. The reason for that, Torrens himself was a Member of Parliament in 1826, and he introduced a bill based on his name, the Torrens title. What was happening, even back then, in the early 1800s, and we'll blame the blokes because I don't think there are any ladies. Ladies would never do this. What they were doing, they would create the 3 titles, send them to the appropriate areas, and print another one with their name on the title, and they would either sell it in Western Australia or in Queensland. So, you know, back then there was no mail or certainly nothing electronic. So they got away with it for quite a while. So the reason that Torrens came up with the 3 identical was, yes, the titles office would have access to 2 of those, not the third one. The titles office never got their hands on the third one in the archives. The archives, when the property changed hands, would update theirs. Yeah. So,
Can I just comment on that? When I went there a couple of months ago and went to the archives, I could copy what I wanted to onto a memory stick,
yes.
but you cannot print it off.
Yeah.
It tells you, I tried a few different ways until I come up with it, said this is not able to be.
Oh, so they're saying you can't print it?
Yeah.
It's encoded in actually blocking it.
Oh, right.
They're blocking it.
In the
And it
actual-
Yeah.
tells you-
So you could download it onto your computer?
Memory stick.
No,
Are you
only on the memory, I've got it on the memory stick
From the archives?
I can't remember whether I've actually tried. I gave Rick a copy of what it said. So some of it I could see and print off.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I do have a copy a solicitor gave us from.
Yeah.
So would that be, it's an A4 size
Yes.
but it's solid.
It still has the information,
Yeah.
front and back of the parchment?
I think so.
Yeah.
Not sure.
It'll only be a copy, like it won't have the,
Oh, yes,
the window at the bottom that you can see through and stuff like
Oh,
it
no,
hasn't got that.
no.
And we're actually the second owner of that land.
That's all, right.
So the first owner, I think in 1981 or 2.
Uh-huh.
And then he was original, he had the land.
Yes,
What did they
from
call
the Crown.
Yeah, Crown land.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
and now we're second owner.
Well-
But it's a block, so there's other blocks
Yeah.
as well.
Yes,
And I was able to see the others too.
yeah.
So,
No, well that's what I'm saying to people. If you can get back to the original title, because it will actually be in fee simple.
yeah.
And when it comes down to any legal argument, the rights of the disponeur So that is the Crown. So the rights from the Crown travel without reservation to the purchaser. The wording,
Yeah, and when.
hang on, I'll just finish. So the rights of the disbonneur, the Crown, travel without reservation to the disbonnee, the purchaser, save for those that are listed in the deed of grant. Now, some of the real early parchment ones actually had the reservations listed within the wording. Later on in years, when petroleum and coal and gas and all of that came into the reservations, they created a separate document. So if you have one of those later documents, it will have deed of grant and a number. So if you're going to do the research, make sure you actually get the details that are on the deed of grant. It'll be a number printed on the front of the actual certificate of title. The reason I say that, and I only am aware of this in one case, but it was a Lulu. Queensland government built the Toorong power station up on the Darling Downs, and it was a multi-megawatt power station, and I was doing title work even back then. This is 30 years ago. And I'd asked people not to bring their originals, copy their originals, make sure you've got the deed of grant. So this gentleman brought his along, and his property abutted where they were building the actual power station. So I'm reading the deed of grant, and the Crown had not reserved coal at that time. So he was an instant multi-millionaire overnight because he owned the coal. So the Queensland government had no option other than to buy it off. So that's, now I'm not saying...
So you woke him up?
Oh yeah, he did not know. Yes. So there is purpose in having the deed of grant. And the thing that you'll find now in these blue certificates, there's no mention of the deed of grant. And I think what the government is doing is, in a classy way, taking ownership of all of the things that were normally reserved to the Crown. Okay, so we've got to keep going. Come on, wake up. Good. Okay, so this is the legislation that they used to actually cancel your paper titles. So they altered the Subdivision Act, and the second one, there's one further down, the Land Act, 1958. So they had to alter both of those. Come on, pretty please. Yeah. Not quite sure what's going on. Why? No. Yes, please. Yes, yes.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. So, Victoria again is different to all of the other states. In all of the other states that I've researched so far, the registrar is a corporate entity, not in Victoria. Melissa Harris, and I absolved myself, she's not a rally. I had nothing to do with that. She is a public servant and subject to FOIs. Whereas in all of the other states, because they are a part of a company, right, you cannot apply for a freedom of information on a company, but you can on Melissa Harris because she is a public servant. So get in there and ask her what the hell she's done with your titles. I'm for real.
A real fact, you know. Fact
Yes.
very-
Yes. Okay. And she also is the registrar of the Victorian Water Register. And she's also the acting chief of the LUV, which is land utility or something like that, Victoria.
Land use.
Land use, Victoria.
Land use.
Mm. Now we're missing just a little bit up on the top. So, COAG, first of all, so this is an organisation that has no standing, no powers whatsoever, created the Australian Register's National Electronic Council, ARNEC. Once they had created ARNEC, the first thing that ARNEC then did was establish the Electronic Lodgement Network. So that's the ELN. Commonwealth Bank put 200 million into seed funding. Morgan and Stanley put $200 million into the seed funding, and Link, the parent company of PEXA, nice little arrangement, isn't it? They put up 200 million. So, stretching right throughout the whole of Australia is an exclusive network to actually facilitate the electronic lodgement. So that's $600 million. Now, Link is the same international company that controls and operates all of your toll roads, your tunnels, and everything like that. So, a lot of us are aware of BlackRock. Pretty well everyone has heard of BlackRock. Well, BlackRock sits up there. BlackRock has substantial shares in Link, and Link has substantial shares in BlackRock. So their link is not some little, itty-bitty company. It is up there at the same level as BlackRock. So they established the electronic lodgement network first, then ARNEC then created the Electronic Conveyancing National Law, which we saw earlier on that Victoria has adopted. So that's not out of the Parliament. It's just as if all of the governments have totally bypassed their parliamentary process and set this up in the corporate entities.
That's the real problem. It's not the electronic titles, it's this.
Yes, the gentleman's saying it's the problem is not the electronic title, it's who's administering it. So then, once all of the states and the territories had adopted the electronic conveyancing national law, then ARNEC itself, then, as the registrars, they are the entity that actually authorises the electronic lodgement network operators. So it would have been that Ian, whatever his name was, in between 2013 and 2016, he would have been the person, not a parliament, him individually would have authorised PEXA to operate on that electronic lodgement network, and also Simply Australia. So that's just a little bit about ARNEC itself. They also, ARNEC as well, developed the model participation rules. So that's what PEXA and Simply Australia have to operate under. So it's not an act of Parliament, it's just a commercial contract between corporate entities. Now also, up until now, I haven't heard anything contrary to this. The network that is set up at the moment, neither PEXA nor Simply Australia, their computers can't talk. So, no. So, if the person selling the property, their conveyancer may be with Simply Australia, and the purchaser could be, their conveyancer could work through PEXA, guess what they have to do? Get out the old paperwork. $600 million and the computers can't talk to each other. Yeah. So that's the electronic lodgement network operators, PEXA and Simply Australia. That's the national law that Victoria has actually passed an act of Parliament to adopt it and can't alter it. And these are the electronic lodgement network operators. So they're also known as ELNs.
So then what you're saying though is that the network really isn't a network if those two things can't meet.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. A bit slow to catch up.
Brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. So this is Victoria again. Electronic conveyancing. Yeah. And in brackets, adoption of the national law. So they did, as said earlier on, this is a double up of that original one, and I haven't had time to remove one or the other. So here we have PEXA. They are registered currently on the Australian Stock Exchange. I have seen information that Link has put up their controlling shares. Was originally 48%. They have recently sold their 42% of PEXA, and there's conflicting. Originally, there were articles in the media that there were 3 Japanese conglomerates that were looking at purchasing it. Now I believe it has actually been purchased by corporations in Canada. So irrespective of which of those 2 turn out to be correct, while PEXA was domiciled in Australia, they were subject to Australian laws. Wherever they park it, right, they no longer will they have to comply with Australian law. If they are domiciled in Canada, yes, they'll have to operate under Canada's laws. The real worry with that now is that under international law, the entity that holds the data, so your title is a piece of binary code on either PEXA's or simply Australia's private mainframes. So if under international law, whoever houses the data owns the data. Now I want to be very clear, that doesn't mean they control your property. But it has to be proven whether any transactions that occur following that, if they own it, they may well charge to release it. So look out for that one. So that's the worry with your data, right, being sold to an international entity. But the same thing with the Common Bank, Morgan & Stanley, and Link, the third entity that put up the 600 million. Where do they get a return on their asset?
Well, that is the question. Where do they?
Yeah, well, at this point in time, I haven't been able to establish that. Because the actual $297 that is the charge for your data if you're purchasing a property, then being housed on one of those 2 companies, that is where the entity that has purchased the titles office, they get that. In Queensland, it is Queensland Titles Proprietary Limited, created by the Queensland Government, and in the Act so they used an Act to create a corporation, and it says in that the Queensland Titles Proprietary Limited will receive that $297 and it will not go into consolidated revenue. They will keep it. So I bet in Queensland I could probably name half of the directors on that company, and they're all mates. Yes.
Organisations like BlackRock, Link and others don't go into spending $200 million or more unless they're in it for two reasons: one, control, and two, profit.
Yes.
Both.
Yeah, both.
So, am I reading it correctly that you're saying you don't know where that's going to come from, but there'll be a sting somewhere? Is that how we read it?
I can give you an example, right? The process, what is called monetarising the asset. So in this case, the asset is your little bit of binary code that Victoria is telling you that is the title. Flick your memory back a little bit over 20, 25 years ago when we all started buying computers. In the same shop, invariably, you could pick up a Microsoft on your computer and you owned it. Well, technically,
No,
you didn't.
Exactly.
But you didn't have to pay anything. Now, you buy a computer today, it comes with, if it's other than a Mac, it comes with the program on it. And you pay, because I know I'm doing it, $14.99 a month.
License.
Yes, so Microsoft has declared in Australia there's 1.5 million people using Microsoft 365. Right? So 1.5 million times $15 a month. That's what is monetarising the asset. It's the only thing I can see. You will be charged, or you may be charged, a fee for whoever ends up owning PEXA wherever they are, paying them a fee per month for them to house your title.
So it's like domain.
And if they make that fee high enough, and let's not pretend that BlackRock,
Yeah.
if they make that high enough, they could perhaps claim the properties. Is that?
No, well, no. That will never ever happen. And I'll say this publicly. When John Howard ran his infamous gun buyback, there had been 750,000 private SLRs imported into Australia. He only got 250,000. There is 500,000 SLRs on average, along with 10,000 rounds of ammunition buried in 8-inch poly pipe. And I know in Queensland you couldn't buy poly pipe or the caps or the screw top for 2.5 years. And they're buried so that they're buried vertically, and the top of the canister is a minimum of 6 feet under the ground. Where what?
That's the question, where are they buried? Queensland is buried.
Yes, yeah, and that's why. So, no, if they attempt to touch our properties, well, I'll leave it up to you.
But they're stupid people anyway. To get things online, a Russian just needs to press a button and all your titles are going anyway.
The Chinese.
Yes.
Well, at least
Whatever.
it'll be quick.
Okay, moving on. Right, so even the CommBank was concerned what's going to happen to their 200 mil where PEXA, and this is off PEXA's site, has received 1.6 billion for 42% of PEXA.
Does the Commonwealth Bank have shares in PEXA?
I would assume they would. Well, they've got an interest. Yeah, well, that's why they're complaining. Well, they put 200 million of the seed funding to establish the actual electronic. Yeah.
But what security did they get for the 200 million? They wouldn't have just given them 200 million.
Yeah, my crystal ball hasn't told me that. Yeah. And my ferret that's running around, squirrel, sorry, he hasn't found out either. So that's simply, it is actually simply Australia, but they trade as simply. So PEXA holds 80% of the titles, I got a very snooty email from a director of PEXA that told me in very plain English, we do not hold titles. We have the details of the transfer which we pass on to the relevant state entities, and then they hand it down to the local councils for rates purposes. He was quite upset with me. Because, well, this is way back in 2020, 21, and I was going around, not with the information we've got now, saying, oh, well, PEXAs and Simply hold the titles. So, this is the only entity that I have found that is actually a corporate entity other than all of what ARNEC has created. So that's, is it safe? What's the anacronym on that? Please, Rick.
She said where it was registered.
Yes.
2008.
Yes.
That's before they sold our title.
Yes, correct. This is the infamous Malcolm. So in 2016, I think, isn't it, Rick?
2016.
Yep. He morphed COAG into the National Cabinet. Now, his sole reason for doing that was he was of the mind, in doing that, he would then be able to embargo everything that the National Cabinet did, and embargo it for 30 years. Well, that lasted nanoseconds in the High Court, and they told him he had no standing, it was not a government entity, therefore he couldn't embargo anything, but then try and get something out of a corporation. So, now this is the worrying part. When they transferred COAG into the National Cabinet, have a look at what they were administrating. And bear in mind, it's an it's out there somewhere, not subject to any control by a parliament. So agriculture, the Attorney Generals obviously used to get together and make decisions outside of the parliament. Community services, Council of Federal Financial Relations, Data and Digital, Disability Reform, Education, Emergency Management, Energy and Climate Change. There's actually 19 entities. The environment, health, housing and houselessness, infrastructure and transport, Joint Council on Closing the Gap. Well, I never even looked for the gap. Yeah, skills and workforce, trade and investment, veteran affairs. Well, they're not doing real well there, are they? Water and Murray-Darling Basin, and women and women's safety. What's missing? Men. We don't need looking after. Yeah, so that's how much that the parliaments have actually moved the administration out of the parliamentary process into this now, which is the National Cabinet. And none of that is available to lodge FOIs.
What do they call as a general thing?
Now it is the National Cabinet, inferring that it's quasi-government. This is just some information on LUV. What? Blanky. This was bulletin 223. I had to break it up into 3 slides. So they're all either regulations or process. And that was the third part of that 228. And see in the bottom right hand side column that they strongly advise that you get legal representation if you're going to do anything yourself in relation to LUV. That's just some of the keys, guides, forms, land registration. So they're all parts of LUV. You've got that? Good. If anyone, I've moved on too quick and you want photographs, just go, oi! Yeah, it's, oh yeah, we can back up. We know that, but not much more. Oi! Oi!
Oh, the one before that, actually.
Right, okay.
It's all on video.
That's the one that you wanted? Yeah. That's all available on the internet.
Yeah.
Just go to, or if you just type in LUV Victoria, it'll take you to there. There's much, much more in there. Okay, so this is just reinforcing. Are we having a cuppa?
We are.
Good. While we're having a cuppa, I'll open the Constitution up and show you some relevant things in it. So there's no power within the Constitution that delegates or transfer of land, of Crown land,